Greetings and salutations, my friend. It's been a long time, hasn't it? I haven't made a video in about a month now, and it's the longest I have gone without making a single video, basically since the resurrection of this channel. And even though I mostly focus on writing right now, I was thinking, you know what, I think it's about time to make a new video. Originally, the video is supposed to be about Elon Musk and the Nazi salute. But then I was thinking, you know what? I don't really want to talk about it, even though I have my opinions on it. I don't want to talk about it because I'm so sick of politics, honestly. You know, fuck politics. Fuck politics. I'm going to talk about something that I actually think is fun. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is philosophy. I'm pretty sure we can't find anything toxic there, unlike politics. Well, so here's the thing. There's been this one thing that's been bugging me for a very long time, and that is the relationship between philosophy and science. Well, in theory, you might be thinking there's nothing about philosophy and science that might be contradicting each other. A lot of the time we assign this kind of role to science and religion when we think of like science versus religion. But philosophy and science, that sounds weird, right? Well, not in my experience, at least from what I have seen in both the academic circles and social media and people, society in general. I have encountered philosophy students and philosophy enthusiasts and philosophers themselves who believe that philosophy is superior to science, that science is only examining the surface level of reality through the matter, whereas philosophy goes deeper than that. I also talked with someone who thinks that theology is actually like the highest level of understanding. Philosophy lies somewhere between theology and science. On the other hand, I have also encountered some enthusiasts of physics and chemistry and so on who do not have a single philosophical bone in their body, actually, who think that philosophy is not necessary, it's completely unnecessary and not needed in the world, that science just replaces it, right? Like, what do you need metaphysics for when you have modern physics? They even might compare philosophy, and I've encountered people who have literally compared philosophy to stuff like alchemy. It's just an outdated idea about how we acquire knowledge about the world and the reality around us. I think that this is such a wrong interpretation of what philosophy is. Not only do I think that this is a very wrong interpretation of what philosophy is and what it has to offer, but it's also sort of a contradictory statement that science does not need a philosophy, when the whole statement that everything can be examined and calculated through the use of modern science without the need of philosophical inquiry is actually a philosophical statement in and of itself. It's a statement of epistemic and therefore philosophical nature. Now, I find that these types of arguments on both sides can be leading us into a direction in which I think neither philosophy nor science should be going. Ideally, I think that every philosopher should also be a scientist, or at least have some scientific enthusiasm and interest or background. And at the same time, I also think that every scientist should also be a philosopher. Thirsty. I think I need some water, Reg. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? That every philosopher should be a scientist? So when it comes to philosophy, I don't think of it as something that is separate from science. A lot of the time we treat it as such, yet at the same time, philosophy, at least on the academic level, the rules of doing philosophy on an academic level are sort of based on the same evidence-based scientific methods we would use in the scientific field. Yet, there is such a difference in how we proceed with philosophy and this type of philosophical inquiry compared to science, which is mostly just purely empirical, based on measures and calculations and observations. Because philosophy goes beyond mere observation, unless your philosophical statement is purely based on empiricism, it cannot be based only on that, and pretending it is doesn't necessarily serve us the best way it possibly could. Yet, at the same time, I think we also need to base our philosophical inquiry in the reality of science and the natural world, as well as actually observe the progress of science. What is the science telling us about the world, the changing world, where we are heading, what technology we are developing, things we are discovering about the reality, especially about the space, the universe. I think that philosophy has so much to offer there, as long as it is based in that scientific reality. I think that a lot of philosophers should take interest in science, but physics and technology specifically, but also everything we learn about the functioning of our brains. And one does not necessarily have to be a physicalist or a materialist to take on that approach, because I'm not a physicalist myself, I'm a property dualist. And still, I think that as a property dualist, my interest in, let's say, the nature of human consciousness still exists within the realm of science. And there are things that science alone cannot answer, but if we apply philosophy to science, there's so much more we can do in terms of possibility and feasibility. And I think that what philosophy really brings to science is that which concerns itself with the speculative science. What is possible? The realm of possibility and feasibility. And I think that, you know, at its core, philosophy is based both in logic and intuition. I think that logic is a very, very essential aspect of philosophy, and the way the philosophy is approaching logic and the way it should be should also be based on the scientific methods. However, there's also this method of intuition. You know, sometimes something just makes sense in your head, and then you apply logic to justify that. And I think it's so important to have this element of this scientific logic to counteract that intuition, because our intuition can lead us into wrong directions. We might be thinking we are right about something when we actually aren't. So to be a philosopher, it is not enough to be a dreamer. One needs a scientific backbone. Although, through philosophical intuition, one might actually arrive at answers that some physicists also arrive at through purely scientific method. For instance, I have developed ideas about the evolution of the universe and everything in it that are very similar to Eric Chase's, who is a physicist. Yet his methods of getting there are very different from mine, but we share that same area of interest. At the end of the day, philosophy is really an examination of science. Now, why I think that every scientist should also be a philosopher. You know, I'm not trying to put every single scientist in one single box there, because there are so many scientists that have a very, very different approach to both science and philosophy, very different worldview about everything, right? I'm not going to group everyone into like the same category. Oh, this is what scientists are like, this is what philosophers are like, because that's just not how the world operates. But I think that ideally, scientists should have at least some philosophical bone in their body. If all you do is observe, calculate and measure, that is a job a computer can do. Where's the human element there? With a unique aspect of a human perception of reality. And I think we need to understand science as something more than measurements and numbers. Because at the end of the day, we are observing reality from human perspective. I think that scientists should be concerned with what is possible and what is feasible in the natural world as much as philosophers are. So as much as I would recommend any philosopher to really get into physics, I would also recommend every single scientist or physicist out there to really get into metaphysics, to have this extra perception of the natural world. And honestly, it cannot harm you. No matter whether you are a philosopher or a scientist, having this sort of expansion of your horizons can only benefit you at the end of the day. And it's not just metaphysics that has a place in science, because ethics are just as important in science as metaphysics are, and I think that is especially the truth when we concern ourselves with the type of science that is transforming and morphing the nature. Some people call it creating or creation. I don't call it that because I think that creation is sort of a divine ability that people do not possess. We don't really create things, we transform things. We transform that which occurs naturally into something else. Something that usually has some use for us. Because at the end of the day, you know, like I said, we are observing nature from human perspective, and so everything in nature serves some purpose to us. And the way we deal with technology and nature really proves that. And why ethics are so important in that field? Well, I think it's self-explanatory, really. Just because we think we are capable of doing something doesn't necessarily always mean we should. But most of the time we actually should do that. The question when it comes to the ethics of this sort of transformative morphing science is, how do we do it, how do we approach it, and how do we make sure that it creates more benefit than harm, or minimize harm altogether, preferably. That would be the ideal situation. At the end of the day, it's not just about a pure science of creating something, of getting something done, of achieving something, of achieving some progress. We also need to keep thinking, how exactly do we want this progress to proceed? In which direction do we want it to go, right? And scientists need this ethical approach, and a lot of the time, let me tell you, I don't really see it. And I don't want to be critical here of people, of scientists, because I think they're doing an amazing job. But in that one field, I think it's really lacking. And trust me when I say this, it's sort of terrifying. And you see stuff like that even in medicine students, let's say. I have encountered some medicine students throughout my life, while I was a student of philosophy myself, who did take some ethics classes, medical ethics to be precise, which is really a branch of bioethics, and they either had like no interest in it, they thought it was very difficult, or they thought it was unnecessary. At the same time, I also have a friend who works as a professor who teaches medical ethics to medicine students. And a lot of the time, there is not a lot of philosophical or ethical reflection among medicine students and probably doctors as well, from what I have observed. Philosophy needs science, and science needs philosophy. So, let's stop treating it as some kind of weird competition, because our research and our inquiry should complement each other, and we should be working together, because at the end of the day, we both want to understand the world better, and hopefully we also want to move this world in the best direction possible in the future. So maybe we should just stop with all this childish nonsense, because it's really not getting us anywhere. So that's about it then. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you in the next video, probably soon. There will be less videos in the future because I'm focused on writing right now mostly, but I'll make sure to make at least 1 or 2 videos a month, just to let you know that I'm okay and alive. Alright, I hope you have a good day. I'll see you soon. Ciao.